Hi, I'm Jack. Welcome to the No Limits Business Lounge.
So today on No Limits Business Lounge, I'm very excited because we're speaking to a politician. We're speaking to Michael Lavalette, and we'll be asking the difficult questions about why this country is in such tatters, and you'll listen to Michael's views on a whole host of things. So make sure you tune in. The way we start this is quite naturally. We don't do a formal introduction or anything. This is more of a chat. And I guess the way I want to start off with you, Michael, is something interesting. Last night when we spoke on the phone, usually what I do is I speak to people and just ask them common courtesy, is there anything in particular that you don't want to talk about? And you just outright said, nope, you're open.
Yep.
First thing that comes to my mind, as a politician, how is that even possible?
Well, I suppose, the first thing to say is that I'm a politician, but I'm not a politician, right? So, in the sense that, if people to say, well, what job do you do? What did I do in my life? I would say that I was a university lecturer, a university professor. That was my career. I worked at UCLan, Liverpool University, Liverpool Hope University. I did research, I published 32 academic books. That was my career. So in that sense, I'm not a career politician. I've never wanted to be an MP. I've never wanted to be a Prime Minister. I've never wanted to be any of those things. But for 15 years of my life, I have been an elected councillor. And I suppose the question then would be, well, how did that happen? When I was first elected at Preston City Council way back in 2003, the context of that was the run up to the war in Iraq, and I was actually chair of Preston Stop the War Coalition, and I'd organised the main transport to the main demonstration. So the main demonstration was on the 15th of February 2003. There was 2 million people marched through the streets of London, and we had the biggest turnout from Preston ever. I think we had 1/3 of a train, so across the northwest we booked a train and we had 2 carriages, so we had 70 people, we had about 100 people on the train, and then we had 6 full coaches that went down to Preston, and they were all organised through my house. So my house was chaotic at the time, and they'd run up to that because there was no mobile phones. It was people coming to the door, booking on, giving me money, me allocating them to this coach or that train or whatever. And I was a sort of I was involved in politics around this, I suppose, anti-war and social justice campaigns. And in the way back from that demonstration, it was clear that despite the biggest demonstration in British history, it was clear that Tony Blair was going to take us to war in Iraq. So there was then a debate, what should we do next? And there was a couple of people, long-standing friends now, but a couple of people said, we should stand in the upcoming elections in May, and you should be our candidate. Michael, I don't think I want to be a candidate. Anyway, they persuaded me to stand, and in May that year, I put a condition down. So I said that I would stand as a sort of anti-war candidate, but I wanted to stand in Labour's safest seat, and that was the Preston Town Centre ward at that time. And the reason I wanted to stand there was because I didn't think we would beat Labour, but I thought if we could get second, we could say, well, look how strong the anti-war case is. And that was my sort of thoughts on it. I would be second if we did really well, and that would make a case, and then I would never stand again, and I'd go on with the rest of my life. But we won. And so the Lancashire Evening Post had a photograph the next day, and you're only allowed 6 people at the count, plus yourself, per candidate. So you've only got one, and we only had one where there was me and 6 other people. So there's a picture in the front of the Lancashire Evening Post, and the headline was something like, Preston Labour bombed by anti-war candidate or something like that, one of those headlines like that. And there's a picture of my supporters all ecstatic and excited that they've won, and in the middle there's me looking completely shell-shocked because now I'm a councillor, and I was like, that's not really what I wanted to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, my follow-up question, you pretty much anticipated it, was how the hell did you get into what you're doing? But you've explained that really well. Do you regret getting into it?
So You know, it's like all things, I suppose. Well, first of all, I was having to combine that with my job. So many councillors do that, or else they're old and they're retired and they return to council. And so that was difficult at first. And I'd say for the first year that I was a councillor, I was particularly hopeless. I didn't know what I was doing. And then you work out how to do it. So from about my second year, I thought I was quite an okay councillor. You know, I could represent people, knew what to do. We came up for re-election 4 years later, and I think I was probably at my, you know, doing as good work as you can be. I knew how to work the system. I knew how it worked, how it operated, how to do that. And I was re-elected. And then, actually, it's very tiring. So I think, in all honesty, by the time I got to the end of my 8-year period, I was probably getting very run down and tired by it. And I came to that election and I just got beat. So the year off. And then people asked me to stand again. So I stood again a year later and won again and had got some of my energy back. But then my father-in-law came to stay with us. He was had a terminal illness, and caring, being a councillor and a full-time job was just too much. So I didn't stand again. And that took us to 2014. And I thought, that's it, I'll never do that again. And I had never any intention of doing that again. And when I come back, when my father-in-law died, we moved to Liverpool for 8 years. And when my wife retired, we were saying, well, where are we going to go back to? Where do we want to live? We enjoyed Liverpool, but we didn't feel part of Liverpool. For a few minutes, I was proposing that we move to Scotland, but she's not Scottish and the kids aren't Scottish, so that was a non-runner. She's from East Lancs, but I don't know anybody over in East Lancs. But the place that we'd lived longest and the place that we enjoyed living the most was Preston. So we came back to Preston 2 years ago. And when I came back 2 years ago, I remember people saying, are you coming back to be a councillor? And I was like, absolutely not, I've done that, that's absolutely not. And what I came back to do was to get involved in Palestine solidarity work, because I've been to Palestine 20 times, I've been involved there. And I met a few people that I'd worked with before and I said, look, that's what I want to do. We'll do some fundraising, maybe organise some trips out to the West Bank. And I'd just come back from Palestine. So I came back from Palestine on September the 11th, I think. We moved back to Preston 10 days later, 21st. I met people later that week saying, listen, I'm back, but I just want to do some Palestine stuff. Right, that's fine. And then the following week, 7th of October happens, and sort of life changed, really. And it was through Palestine and the Palestine movement and the campaigns that people persuaded me to stand first in the general election, and then again last May. And that's what brought me back to standing for election.
Because over the last couple of years, what I've noticed online is your popularity has risen quite a lot.
So I think
is it fair to say that, or?
So I think what, among sections, I mean, I think probably because I was, you know, in the last 2 years there's been 32 national demonstrations, and I've organised a coach from Preston to every single one. So just after 7th of October, I was organising coaches. We were going down every second week. It's now, you know, every 4 or 5 weeks, and there's another one on 29th of November, which I'll get a coach on. So I suppose people know that I'm the person that organises the coaches. And then any of the sort of local press and demonstrations, I'm the one that does the liaison with the police, organises the sort of stewards, quite often speak, and you know, the chief steward on it, liaise with the council to make sure that that runs smoothly. They always do run smoothly. We've never had any difficulties. And we've had quite a lot of demonstrations. And then other things, you know, with other people, you know, Ishmael Timmel, Mokhtar Master. A couple of weeks ago, we organised the reading of the names of all the dead children. So I suppose there's been fairly consistently over the last 2 years a regular pulse of Palestinian solidarity activity, which in Preston I've been fairly centrally involved. So that's probably why some people know me more.
Okay, I mean, I feel as if you're downplaying a lot about what you do. So, I mean, why don't you tell us what your actual job is?
My actual job now, or So, so as I say, I was an
You're
academic.
A councillor, right?
Yeah, I was an academic up until 2 years ago, March, what year is this? March 24. And then I stood in the general election in May 24. Once I'd retired, I became the prospective parliamentary candidate 3 days after I retired.
Good retirement present.
Good retirement present. And then, you know, we did perform really, really well in the general election. I mean, we went from
When you say
nowhere.
we, who?
So Preston Independent. So
Right.
the people who were around Palestine Solidarity work in Preston decided that we were going to stand in the general election against Labour. There was an informal network across the country of what the media called the pro-Gaza independents. But that was it was a very loose network, but we knew some of the people, some of them not. Obviously, the most famous one of those was Jeremy Corbyn. People like Leanne Mohammed, people will know, she stood in London. Andrew Feinstein, who we know quite well. And in Preston, we decided to stand as part of that broad network. And obviously, we'd never stood before, so we started with 0 votes, or 0 profile, and we got second. So when
Behind Labour.
Behind Labour. So Preston is an incredibly safe Labour seat. When I first came here, their majority under Audrey Wise was about 25,000. That was the majority. And we took that down so that Mark Kendrick's majority now is 5,000. So that's a really remarkable shredding of Labour's vote, and we went from 0 to second. We beat Reform, who obviously had a bump in the north, but we beat them. And we beat all the other political parties combined. So, you know, Lib Dem, Tory, Green, their vote combined was less than what we got. So that was really significant. And obviously, the pro-Gaza independent network got 5 MPs returned. So Adnan and Blackburn, Jeremy, and then, you know, Shayab, Ayub, Iqbal, they were all returned. And after that, there was the start of discussion about how we can form a new political organisation out of it. But it wasn't just the 5 MPs. There was the 5 MPs, and then there was a whole host of people who got votes in the 20 to 30%, and we were one of them. Andrew Feinstein was one, Leanne Mohammed was one. And the important thing about that is that although last May there was a landslide Labour government, it was the best ever, if you like, left of Labour vote in British history, ever. You know, in 1945, the Communist Party got 2 MPs. In 2006, I stood for Respect, and in Preston we saved a deposit, but I got 6%. George Galloway got elected, but George Galloway was the only one that got elected. And we got 4 people who got over 15% of the vote. We got over 60 people who got more than 15% of the vote this time, and we get 5 MPs. So the sort of demand, I think, for a new political party was there. It's taken us a long time to get there. And in the meantime, we were left with a bit of a quandary, because almost 9,000 people voted for us. And then the following May, there was the Lancashire County Council elections. Were we just going to be the kind of politicians who turn up, ask you to vote for us and then disappear? Or were we going to stand? And so we decided in Preston Independence that we would stand in 4 seats. And in May, we won 3 of them. So I'm now, along with Yusuf Matala and Almas Razakazi, I'm now one of 3 Preston Independents that sit in Lancashire Council. There's another 4. I don't like calling ourselves pro-Gaza independents, but that's how the media refers to us. So there's another 4 of them from East Lanc, so there's 7 of us. And with 4 Green councillors, we are the main opposition to reform in Lancashire County Council. So yeah, so that now means that I'm a councillor. It's not a full-time job, but it can be as full-time as you want. So
what are some of your duties then as
some
a
of the duties.
councillor?
So
I know you're obviously organising a lot of events.
Yeah.
But is that part of your remit or outside of your remit?
So that's a really good, interesting question. Obviously, you got elected to represent the people in your ward or your division. And what does that mean? So I think that means several different things. So first of all, the job of your local councillor, whether it's the Preston City or Lancashire County Council, is to pick up casework. So now people get really confused about that because of the way that some roles are performed by Preston City Council, some by Lancashire County Council. So if you've got a housing problem, or if you've got a problem with rubbish, people will come to me about that, and I can filter that, but that's actually Preston City Council that deal with refuse collection, or somebody's dumped some bedding or some rubbish in the street. I don't have any say over that. That's a Preston City function. Or if it's a housing issue, that's a Preston City function. Or if there's something wrong with Moor Park or Avon Park, that's a Preston City Council function. Lancashire Council have roads, so that's a big issue for people, you know, potholes, parking, all those kind of issues. That would be Lancashire Council. Lancashire Council have social services, so any child protection issues, any children and families social work, looked after children, education is a county function, SEND education is a county function, adult social care, so looked after facilities for older people or daycare centres for older people, that's a Lancashire County Council function. So very important parts of our day-to-day activity. So if somebody's got a problem with any of those, so if somebody's got a problem with flooding, or if somebody's got a problem with a pothole, or if somebody's got an elder relative who is having a difficulty with a care home or a daycare facility, my job is to represent them, to advocate on their behalf, to try and chivvy Lancashire County Council along, to be as much of a pain to them as I possibly can to make sure that something's done. So one of your jobs is to represent people, to be almost like a community representative and a vocal, outspoken person for the community. That's one of the things that you're meant to do. The second thing is that you have to go to council meetings. So there's not a lot of full council meetings, but you're there representing both the party and the people, and you speak at meetings as they go through. That's where all the policies are decided. Obviously, I can argue for what I want, but at the moment in Lancashire, Reform have got 53 councillors, and in the main opposition, we've only got 11, so they're going to win most of them. But again, you can try and make points, try and point out the fallacies, try and point out the errors of their way. Then there's also committees of council. So at the moment, I'm on 2 of those. So I'm on what's called the Children and Families Scrutiny Panel. So I'm the vice chair of that. That means that I can call in if they were going to close a children's home, or if they're failing around SEND education, which they are. We've got the right to call into that committee and call the cabinet members forward to justify what they're doing or explain what they're doing. So I'm on the Children and Families Committee, and I'm on the Pensions Committee. And the Pensions Committee is where we have oversight of everybody who's worked for Lancashire County Council or Preston City Council, so any of the districts and the councils, and there.
So it seems like you've got like quite a broad...
So it's a very broad, it's sitting in committees, it's representing people, and then the final thing, I suppose, is that you're elected politically. So I would say that most people elected me to talk out about Palestine.
I noticed online as well, it says, I don't know, I don't like this word defect, but it says apparently you defected to the Your Party movement. Talk to us about that, because that's relatively new, isn't it?
So I wouldn't say that was a defection at all. So I would say that where Your Party came from, so Your Party is, as I was saying a minute ago, Your Party is the party of Jeremy Corbyn and the 5 Independent Alliance members plus Zara Sultana, who left Labour.
So is this separate from independents or part of it?
So they were all, so the 5 of them were elected as independents. Zara was elected as a Labour MP. Zara then left Labour over Palestine, the 2-child benefit caps, winter fuel. She left and she then has joined. So we've now got 6 independents. But as I said, before the general election, those independents were in a very loose network of independents. And because we won those, and because we've won a number of council seats now, in Burnley just this week, we won 2 more council seats in Burnley for people who were pro-Gaza independents, but who have made it clear that they are supporters of Your Party. So Your Party is a new party that has come out of the Palestine movement and those that were elected last year. So in a sense, I don't think that's a defection. That's us just saying, well, that's where we came from.
Well, I mean, a follow-up question to that, because this is something that I struggle to understand people's loyalties, and I'll give you myself as an example, because for all my adult life, right, until the age of probably 25, 26, I'd always vote for Labour. And the reason why I'd voted for Labour, I didn't have a clue. And I'd only follow who my dad would vote for. And because I started with that, it's sort of like a football team. You started with one party, you just stick with them no matter what. I changed that in 26 because in my head at that time of my life, I started taking an interest in politics, but I'm not bothered about politicians, more about, okay, what do they actually do? So my voting now each year is based on my humanity. So what I mean by that is I look at who's representing my sort of area / district, and I choose the person that I feel is, okay, they've got a bit of humanity about them. And if they're against my personal ethics or my beliefs, no.
Yeah.
When I speak to people a lot, they're still voting based on loyalty. Now, politicians themselves, as of late, that loyalty seems to be not disappearing, but they're questioning their own parties, which I feel is good. What can you tell me about that?
So to put that, so I would be the same. I think most people would be the same. I grew up in a Labour voting family. I voted Labour. I joined the Labour Party in a very long time ago, in 1979, I think. I left the Labour Party in 1981 and haven't been a member since, but I have been involved in various different left-wing, I suppose, organisations and campaigns, but I've still, by and large, voted Labour, except when I stood against them, or there was some, various times. But for the vast majority of the time, I would be the same. What I think really is happening is I think there's a fundamental shift in British life at the moment. And if I could give you an example, I'll give you it from Caerphilly, so in Wales. It's not Preston, it's not the North East. But I think the election result in Caerphilly 2 weeks ago was an astonishing result for a number of reasons. First of all, because Reform put a huge amount of resources in there and they thought they were a shoe-in to win it, and they didn't win. So that was, from my point of view, a good thing. Plaid Cymru did win on a sort of what I would call a left-wing ticket, in other words, dealing with the cost of living crisis, investment in welfare, stop our intervention in overseas wars, give people a proper pay rise. That was their platform and they won. But I think the really interesting thing about that is that Caerphilly was a Labour stronghold. And if you looked at the votes for the Labour Party and the Tory Party, Labour got 11% and the Tories got 2%. These are the two main parties of British parliamentary democracy for the last 100 years. The Tory Party, you may have heard it, the Tory Party are the most successful pro-business, pro-party in the world in terms of the amount of time that they've been in power compared to everybody else. So, and yet 2% of the vote they got and Labour got 11%. And I think that that's a general picture, is the disillusionment with both Tories and Labour and the fracturing of their votes to all sorts of directions.
Well, I mean, in general, I just think people are sick and tired.
Yeah.
That's my feeling towards them.
Sick and tired of them, and I think the fact that actually for the last 40 years, it really doesn't matter because who you voted for, because when they're in power, they've done the exact same thing. And for 40 years, they've both been involved in increasing wars overseas, increasing inequality within Britain, increasingly selling off our welfare state, increasing the wealth of the most wealthy in our society at the expense of the poorest. I always think that, you may have heard it said, but Britain's the 6th richest country in the world. And yet when I say that to people at meetings, people don't believe it because they can't believe that they're living in the 6th richest country because they can't pay their rent.
Well, I mean,
they can't put food on the table.
If you look at the country as a whole, My perception of it and my experience of it on numerous occasions, why do I pay tax? Right? You pay tax so that you get the services that you are entitled to. The NHS is on its knees.
Yep.
And that's not even an exaggeration,
Yep.
right? I'll use myself as an example. I had to wait 18 months for an appointment. When I got to the appointment, I had to wait another 5 hours for that appointment. The transport system is a joke.
Yep.
That's just the nicest way to put it. The education system is failing, no matter what anyone says. Politicians, and I've got a list here, are constantly in scandals.
Yep.
Right? People are struggling financially, cost of living crisis.
Absolutely.
Right? People are being taxed more left, right, and centre, whether it's directly or indirectly.
Yep.
In short, it's a shit show.
It is.
How has this been allowed to happen?
Yeah. So, and I think that's at the heart of the problem, because people look at it and say politicians are the same and this is what's happened, and they're absolutely right to say those things. Let me take some of your examples. You know, transport. My eldest daughter lives in Melbourne. Now, nobody in their right mind is going to say that Melbourne is a socialist nirvana. It's not. They've got conservative government. But when I go to visit my daughter in Melbourne, the transport system runs incredibly smoothly. You buy a day ticket. You can go on any tram around the city centre for as many journeys as you want. Last time I was there, we were in Sydney. I got the boat from Manly into Sydney. I got the underground from Sydney Harbour to the train station. I got on a train. I travelled 2 hours to Newcastle to see some relatives. I came back, the exact same journey. It cost me $12, £6 in total. It would have cost hundreds of pounds.
To go to London, what?
It's madness.
£200-300
The
now?
most expensive. And we've privatised all that, and it costs a fortune. And you look at all the things in the last 40 years, all the services that we've privatised. Water. The water is a disaster. We put pollution into our rivers and into our seaways, and yet when it was privatised, what they've done very successfully is give huge dividend payouts to top shareholders. Millions of pounds has gone there. Gas, electricity, the same. They all used to be nationalised. All the profits used to go back into the state. They would go back into services. They've all been creamed off by private shareholders, private equity. You think about, so it's transport, gas, electricity, water, the main utilities. These are all natural monopolies. They should be run by the nation state in the interest of the people of the nation state. We sold them off. Then you look at the privatisation model that has come into education, into social care, into adult social care, into hospital systems. You know, if you go to the hospital, your nurse will have an NHS label on it, but you may not be employed by the NHS. You could be an agency nurse. This is madness. We have allowed private interests to take money out of the system, and effectively it's been going on for 40 years. The consequence of that is, at the bottom, the vast majority of us are absolutely struggling with paying tax, more indirect tax than direct tax. So we pay a huge amount on VAT. We're struggling through tax. We're struggling to put food on the table. We're struggling to pay the bills. We see our services crumbling all around us, and yet we're the sixth richest country in the world. So where does the money go?
Make sense.
The money goes to the top.
So the solution to all that, we were talking about it before, and I was asked a question, what do you think is going to happen in the budget? And I just said, I'm sick and tired of hearing that word, because every single time I turn a corner, another budget. We've just discussed all these problems, but it appears that the only solution we hear about is raising taxes.
So, yeah, but it depends on raising taxes on who, okay? So, if it was me, I would be giving tax cuts in terms of national insurance payments. I would immediately withdraw VAT payments. When I was growing up, VAT was at 5%, it's 20%. So put it back down to 5%, right? Because it's the most iniquitous tax. It means the wealthiest person in Britain and the poorest person in Britain pay 20% on the same good if they were buying it. For the richest person, that's nothing. For the poorest person, that's a huge commitment for them to buy it. So you could reduce VAT immediately. You could reduce the lower entry points of taxation. You could put up you can make it £20,000 before you start paying tax or anything. You've immediately cut how much money you've got as a country, but we are incredibly wealthy. So the thing that I didn't finish off saying, the top 50 people, so just 50 people in Britain, their wealth is £450 billion. 450 billion, that's what we spend as a country on education, pensions and healthcare combined. And yet there's 50 people who earn as much as we spend as a country on that. If you want to increase it, the richest 350 people have got a combined wealth of £775 billion. That's more than Ireland earns as a country. It's more than Belgium earns as a country, and they've got £775 billion.
So are you saying your solution is to tax these people more?
So my solution is that there needs to be redistribution of wealth. You know, if you think about it, those 350 people have got £775 billion. If we took half of that, right, they would still have over £1 billion each, right? That's more than you and me will ever earn in our entire lifetime, okay? If we took half of that, that would pay our entire welfare budget, right? Okay, well, you might say, well, that's a one-off. What would you do the following year? Except that those 350 people, they earn £896. Their wealth increases £896 every second. And that doesn't sound very much. But if you think about a second, then every minute, that becomes something like £17,000 a minute. By the time you get to 24 hours, that's £77 million every 24 hours they're earning. So by next year, their wealth is back up at the huge levels and we can pay for services again.
I mean, I'll make it clear, I agree. I don't agree with a lot of the budget speculation, but I agree with what you said. However, playing devil's advocate, let's say I was one of those top 30 or top 50 people that had that money, I wish I did. My response would be, well, why should I cough up? Why is it my responsibility? It's my money, I've earned it my way. Why should I do it?
Of course, the vast majority of them haven't earned it their way. They like to say that, don't they? They like to say that I earned. I mean, think about that. Think about the person in Preston who is on average wage. So in contrast, the average wage nationally is £37,000 a year. In Preston, it's £35,000 a year. So think about that person in Preston who's on £35,000 a year. They probably get up at 6, get the kids ready, they go to work, they work all day, really hard, they come home, pick the kids up, feed the kids, go to bed, and at the end of the month, they're struggling to put food on the table. Sometimes their kids go to bed hungry, they can't pay the rent, they've got tax bills to pay, they've got gas and electricity bills that are coming in that they don't know where they're going to get the money from. They work as hard as anybody. And yet you've got somebody who says, I've got all this through my... They didn't get £450 billion.
I get that, but what I'm saying is, why is it the responsibility of those people and why is it not the responsibility of the government? Because the government should be doing something about that. So
the government in a sense doesn't have any money without where it gets it from. So
stop sending money abroad.
Well, yes, of course.
That would free up what, 40, 50 billion?
So it depends. So it depends what you mean by that. If you mean stop sending arms to Israel and Ukraine, I'm absolutely with you. If you mean stop sending money to countries who have just... So should we send money to Jamaica, given the hurricane last week? We absolutely should. Yeah. In that kind of sense.
I think anyone with an ounce of humanity would say keep humanitarian aid. Yeah. But what is the need to fund wars?
Yeah. Well, look, I agree with that.
Countries all over the world.
I agree with that. And of course, Donald Trump has now demanded that the NATO countries of Europe increase their arms spending to 5% of GDP. Now, people might not know, but GDP is the entire amount of money that Britain earns. So it's not just what governments get, it's not government spending, it's 5% of GDP. That's £125 billion. So he's saying that we should spend £125 billion a year on weapons to fight wars in other people's lands. Personally, I'm for wages, not weapons. I'm for welfare, not warfare. So I think we should stop that immediately. So yeah, but that 125 billion, that would cover the pension budget in total. It's about 115. It would cover the education budget in total. It wouldn't cover for all the healthcare budget. And of course, All of those services requires more, but it would certainly be a start. I'm absolutely in favour of that.
So I mean, sticking on public perception, because I think what a lot of politicians fail to understand is public perception. How does the normal average person see the world of politics, see the world of a politician? What do they think? I'm going to read a few things that I found within 5 seconds online. 2025, Tulip Sadiq was involved in corruption investigations of helping embezzle 3.9 billion. She resigned. 2024, Jeffrey Donaldson, accused of rape and sexual offences, resigned. 2024, Frank Hester commented about Diane Abbott, which is disgusting. Looking at Abbott makes you want to hate all black women and that she should be shot. 2022, Chris Pincher, sexual harassment. 2021, David Cameron lobbied for a company to receive COVID loans. I think it was 250,000 or so. 2021, Partygate scandal. 2018, Windrush scandal. 2017, blood scandal. Fraud scandals, expense scandals, tax evasion, countless other scandals, bribery, acceptance of gifts, Taylor Swift concerts. It goes on and on and on and on. These are the people that are supposedly elected.
Yeah.
Can you see why there's a massive distrust amongst the average person?
Absolutely. You know, there's an old joke, a Scottish comedian, a guy called Billy Connolly, and I remember him, he said one time that when it comes to general elections, he said that his qualification is that anyone that wants to be an MP should immediately be debarred. And I can agree with that, in the sense that I don't think people should see being a politician as a career. And if they do, if that's their career, that should bar them. Similarly, you know, it's I want to draw a distinction between MPs and councillors here. MPs are very, very well paid, close to £100,000 a year. They should not have second jobs. There are lots of them that have got second jobs as lawyers or as pick it up there. Nigel Farage earns £1.2 million a year for his job on GB News. That's in addition to his £100,000 as an MP. That's in addition to his huge pension from the European Union, which he was always against, but he takes a pension, and he's got 10 other jobs. So how can you be an MP and represent people if you have got 11, 12 other jobs at the same time? So for MPs, they shouldn't be allowed other jobs. They shouldn't be allowed to take gifts or hospitality. Now that's difficult. I'll come back. I mean, sometimes I've been offered hospitality and I say no to it, but you've got to declare it. I think it probably depends on the scale. If you do some work for somebody and they give you, you know, and they say, oh, come and have some dinner with me, I think that's of a completely different scale to somebody getting, you know, Taylor Swift tickets or, you know, suits or whatever. You know, if you're an MP, you shouldn't be getting suits. You can buy your own suits. You've got a big enough salary, sort that out. So I don't think they should get second jobs. They shouldn't be allowed to have second jobs. They shouldn't be allowed to take backhanders, gifts, payments. The question of expenses is more difficult, because if you are in Preston and your workplace is in London and you have to go back, I do think you should have expenses, but it shouldn't be for first class travel in the train.
Well, what I mean by expenses,
you know,
is reasonable expenses. Yeah. There was an MP in 2020 that decided to expense an iPad and roaming charges because his children were watching football.
Outrageous. There was a Labour MP who claimed expenses for a packet of biscuits. Come on. There was the famous examples
there's
of,
just
you
so
know,
much distrust.
There's so much. Absolutely. So by and large, all of those things. So acceptable, and we need to be much tighter about what acceptable expenses are. The rest of it aren't expenses. Suits aren't an expense. Biscuits aren't an expense. Wi-Fi roaming isn't an expense. All those kind of things need to be stopped. Second jobs need to stop. But at heart, you know, I suppose it takes me back to where I started. I've never considered myself to be a politician. I was an academic. I would like to see Parliament full of people who don't see themselves as politicians, who are teachers or social workers or electricians or boiler makers or TV interviewers or whatever it is that people are, but people who come from ordinary backgrounds with ordinary jobs, who go to Parliament and who maybe, you know, as I was saying earlier on, I found as a councillor that after 2 terms, it's quite exhausting. So maybe we should say that you're not allowed to be more than 2
So there should be a more stricter test to get into it.
Absolutely.
Because when I look at the main leaders of this country, I always think, how can Keir Starmer, how can Rishi Sunak and a whole host of other people who are billionaires, how can they know what the average person goes through? I've seen videos of Rishi Sunak trying to use a petrol pump. I've seen him struggling to use a card. I've seen him guess the price of a can of beans and not have any idea. I just think it's bizarre.
Yeah.
So when I think of politicians, right, I just think to become a politician or MP or councillor, especially at the higher end, you have to be a billionaire/millionaire. You have to have all this wealth, land, properties to be in that position. That cannot be a parameter of. Absolutely. It can't be.
Absolutely.
But why is it?
I mean, that's a trend that's shifted. You would need to say that in the Conservative Party, it's always primarily been like that.
Status.
Status. If you look at, you know, historically, the number of Conservative MPs who have been privately educated and at the top private schools, it's always been full of people from Eton and Harrow and you know, the various schools who then get filtered through to Oxford and Cambridge universities and then go to the Tory party.
But how are those doors open to them immediately? So why can I, for example, just a normal person, I just want to make a change. I want to do something that's good. Why can I not get there?
So obviously in theory, you can.
But it's rare.
But it's rare. The Labour Party used to have more people from normal backgrounds, if you like, more trade unionists, more people who'd started in those things. But even the Labour Party, that's been squeezed out. There's very few people who come from those backgrounds. I think we should reassert that. I think we should say that, you know, I think at £100,000 MPs get paid too much. I think MPs should be paid because before 1918, MPs weren't paid. And if they weren't paid, then only those with private money could go to Parliament. So working people just couldn't go. So I'm in favour of paying MPs, but I don't think they need £100,000. They could get £60,000, which would be a good wage and expenses. And I would say that for many ordinary people, that is maybe more than I'm earning or round about what I'm earning. And so I'll take some time out of my job and go to be an MP. And those who have got huge lands and whatever can either finance themselves or think I'm not doing it for 60,000. That's up to them. So I think we should cut down the wages. We should have proper expenses so that people aren't out of pocket and people are there to represent it. I think we should maybe think about you only do 2 terms. Yeah. And I think that people should always have the right of recall so that if I say I'm going to go to Parliament and I'm going to vote for more money to health, I'm going to vote for more money to schools, I'm going to vote for a wage rise for everybody, and then I get to Parliament and I vote against more money to schools and against more money to hospitals, I think people in my constituency should have the right to recall me, put a petition round, call me back and said, you're a liar. You said you were going to do this and you're doing the polar opposite. Yeah. So I do think we should have more democracy to try and control.
Because right now I don't think there's no actual test to stop any of this happening. And I mean, take for example, undoubtedly the likes of Keir Starmer, etc., they'll receive a salary. But what I think should happen is there should be a full disclosure of net value, everything that they earn, all of the assets that they hold. And if they have over a certain limit whereby they don't need that salary, they don't get it. Because, I mean, let's be honest, why should those MPs who are worth millions and billions receive £100,000 salary? They don't need it, and that money could go somewhere else.
So my own solution to that would be that we need a proper taxation system. I know people say, oh, there he is talking about increasing tax, but remember, I'm not in favour of VAT, and I'm not in favour of people earning £20,000 and £30,000 a year paying any tax. I'm taxing top. So if in your example, that person is a multi-millionaire and is also getting 100,000, I would let them get the 100,000, but their entire wealth should be part of their taxable income. You know, I gave the example, I was speaking with, and somebody said, well, how would that work? And I'd say, well, it should be your wealth that's taxed, not just your earnings. And therefore those who have wealth of the billions should be paying on that level. That would never work. And I said, well, you know, the Muslim community in this country pays zakat at 2.5% of wealth, not of earnings, every single year. And that's in addition to the tax that they pay. So I'm not suggesting, you can imagine some people going, oh, there he is, he's asking for Sharia law. I'm not asking for Sharia law at all, but I'm just saying there's an example where you could tax at 2.5% everybody's wealth. And if we were to tax the wealthiest at 2.5% of their wealth, we would have loads of money to put into services for ordinary people.
Yeah. Now, obviously, sticking on public perception that we said there's a massive distrust and the outlook of politicians is very negative, and there seems to be no hope in this country. I myself, I'd love to get into politics only because I want to be influencing change, but I just think, what's the point? On the flip side, what we've seen this week in America, New York, that was astonishing. And what I'm referring to is Zohran Mamdani in New York, being the youngest mayor since 1860 something, I can't remember. Explain to all the viewers, what is the big fuss here?
What's the big fuss?
And what's your opinion?
So, well, I think there's two events recently have been the sort of have given us hope, or maybe more generally three. But anyway, the two. So not just New York, but Catherine Connolly in Ireland, on a very similar programme, walked the presidency of Ireland on a anti-intervention in Palestine, de-recognition of Israel, redistribution of wealth in Ireland, very similar to what Zoran was arguing for in New York. My view about all this is that if we have politicians who are prepared to stand up and speak truth to power and tell them what's needed, the problem with the politicians in this country is that they will all say the same thing. We can't afford this, we can't afford that. I'm sorry, we're the sixth richest country in the world, we can afford to do quite a lot of things. And look at what Zoran stood on. An immediate rent freeze, absolutely. The rent, there's two ways of getting a house in this country. You can either buy, in which case mortgages are astronomical, or else you can rent, in which case rents are astronomical. We have got a major housing crisis. The roots of this go back 40 years when Margaret Thatcher sold off council housing. And people might say, well, council house. Where I was brought up, everybody lived in a council house. It wasn't stigmatised. It was good quality. It was cheap rents. It allowed people to go to work. It allowed people to move about from place to place to get jobs. We lived in a council house. All my friends lived in council houses. It was just what happened. And then Margaret Thatcher sold them off in the early 1980s, the Housing Act of 1980. And since then, we've had the roots of a major housing crisis. My daughters pay huge amounts in rent and mortgages, you know, in different situations, but huge amounts. Housing costs are phenomenal. They need to stop. And Zoran stood up, recognised that that's a problem, and says immediate rent freeze.
Well, when I look at Zoran, it's I just see, okay, that's what I want. As in, okay, he's just normal. He's a normal person, and he's talking like a normal person. He's seeing what the normal person lives like. And that was when I was watching a lot of the articles on him and videos on, I was just thinking, wow.
Yeah.
And he's 34. And opposing him, he had billionaires funneling millions of dollars to stop him getting into power, and he still did it.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's not actually highlighted how extraordinary that was.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a fantastic result for anybody
who's... This is New York we're talking about.
It's a fantastic result for anybody who's on the progressive side of politics, which I am. I would see the politics of press and independence and your party as it's formed. I should say, of course, it's called your party because we haven't got a name yet. And because the members will decide what it is. So it's your party just now, and we'll decide what the name is in November at the end of this month. But I think what Zoran was arguing for is exactly what your party stands for. What Catherine Conlon Allen was arguing for is exactly what your party. So I see your party as being part of that international impulse.
More of a socialist movement.
Of a left movement, yeah. I would call myself a socialist, but I know that a lot of young people don't quite get what that is. But for me, what that means is more money in welfare, end to student fees, better paid, cheaper rents, better housing, you know, those fundamental things that we need to be provided, and we can afford that in this country.
Well, that's what I don't think people understand. That's all doable. It's all
doable.
possible.
Yep.
We have the money and resources for it.
Yep.
And people are assuming we don't.
Yeah.
That's one of the issues.
And I think people assume that we don't because they don't.
Yeah.
I can't afford any more. The key thing is we're not asking ordinary people to pay anymore. In fact, we're going to give ordinary people more. We are saying those at the top of society have to pay their share. For 40 years, they have got wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. The inequality, what's sometimes called the Gini coefficient, but the lines of inequality between 1945, when we established the welfare state, and the mid-1970s, there was still inequality in our country. The rich were still rich, but the gap between rich and poor got narrower and narrower. And since 1976, they have gone in opposite directions.
Yeah.
And we're now back to the sort of levels of inequality that we had in Victorian Britain. Well, that needs to change.
So, I mean, why is this such a threat to Trump? Why is Donald Trump reacting in such a way to Zoran in New York?
Well, that's in my view. That's obvious because Zoran is the polar opposite of Trump, and Zoran represents a threat to everything that Trump stands for. And if you look at Trump in New York with his, I mean, you know, everything's gold, isn't it? He's gold this, gold that. I mean, it's that ostentatious wealth of those people who, you know, it always makes me laugh because his mum was, I think, an illegal immigrant to America. His various wives have been migrants, and yet he wants to attack migrants coming in to New York. It's the age-old game of those at the top. They have it all, and to stop us realising that they're the problem with it all, they start to get us to fight with each other. It's that person that's you're so poor because that person's got tuppence halfpenny more than you, or that person's come into the country and taken your job. And all the time they say that, they get richer and richer and richer. So Trump's against Zoran because Zoran is speaking truth to power and is a challenge to the wealth and the power of Trump.
So you've mentioned it a few times about your stance on Palestine and Gaza, and it would be remiss of me not to sort of get onto this topic because I myself am very, very pro-Gaza, and I hate what's happened, as do a lot of people. But you recently got into a little bit of trouble, didn't you?
Oh, well, people reported me to the police. Yeah, that's
so.
Good.
I mean, I've got the quote. I've got the quote here.
Yeah.
You said on Facebook.
Yeah.
There is only one solution: Intifada revolution. Is that what got you into trouble?
That was. So what happened was that I put that on Facebook, and then some local supporters of the State of Israel, some local Zionists, and Reform in Preston made complaints to the council on standards and demanded that I was removed as a councillor. The council threw that out.
Just for that Facebook post?
Just for that Facebook post. And then they reported me to the police, and the police called me in for an interview under caution.
Okay, so let's give a bit of background to all of this, okay? Your entire career was in academia.
Yeah.
You've published articles, numerous ones, such as Forgotten Workforce, Solidarity on the Waterfront, Anti-Racism, Social Welfare, Child Labour in Britain, Class Struggle, Social Welfare, Capitalism and Sport, Voices from the West Bank. So you are an academic, like a fully pledged academic.
Yeah.
Right?
So I was a professor of social sciences at Liverpool Hope when I retired.
You've got a bit of gravitas in what you say. You must have.
Well,
it's from an educator.
Yeah,
it's not as if we are hearing these words from your local John down the street.
So the publications that I've got are subject to the normal academic norms, so they're all referenced. They all go out to referees before publication in that sense. So yeah.
So that statement that you put up on Facebook, explain that statement to the ordinary person.
So look, so let me give you the context of it. I was in one of the national Palestine demonstrations, and that was one of the slogans that was being shouted by one group. And there was I had a small video clip of them shouting it, and then I had pictures of people from Preston on the march, and I put that up. There's only one solution: Intifada, comma, revolution. Comma is important. I'll come back to that in a minute. So what does that mean? You know, I've been involved in politics. I've been involved in Palestine solidarity activity since 1982. And I was at university from 1980 to 1984, and my university, Glasgow University, we twinned Glasgow University with Bearside University in 1982, and since then I've been involved. One of the other big campaigns that I was involved in at the same time was the campaign against apartheid in South Africa. And one of the slogans all the time, I mean, many people will be far too young to remember this because apartheid's long gone. Good. But one of the slogan was it was a kind of song slogan, and it came from the African movement itself, and you used to sing "One solution, revolution," right? And they were talking about South Africa, so one solution, revolution, because it rhymes, okay, partly, but that was the slogan. And then it was taken up by the Palestinians. There is only one solution: Intifada, revolution. Okay, so the word Intifada is put in there as well.
What does Intifada mean?
So Intifada is an Arabic word which means to shake off, and it broadly means to shake off the structures of oppression.
So similar to uprising.
Similar to uprising. So there's a debate in Palestinian or Arabic thought about the range of words that it can. So sometimes it can be uprising, but sometimes it can be more localized rebellions against your oppression. So when I went to the police station, I explained that. I said that the Palestinians themselves talk about three great intifadas. So they talk about, ironically, they talk about the first intifada, which is the second one. But they talk about, so the first intifada that the Palestinians talk about really is the Palestinian Revolution of 1936. There's a new film that's just hitting the cinemas called Palestine 36, and I'd really recommend people go to watch it. Because 1936 in Palestine, there was the most tremendous uprising by the Palestinian people against the British, because it was under the British mandate, and the Palestinians call that an intifada, the 1936 intifada. Then they talk about the first intifada. The first intifada ran from 1987 through to 1992-ish, and it was an uprising of the Palestinian people right across Palestine 48. So it started in Gaza. It went right across to the West Bank, but there was no Palestinian Authority at the time. It was all under Israeli control, and it included the area that is today called Israel. So Palestine 48, it was right across. It was marches, demonstrations, strikes, school strikes. It was lockdown of camps, and the response from the Israelis was brutal. I mean, they turned guns on people who were striking and marching for their rights of equality. And then what is sometimes called the second intifada, which was actually the third, but it started at the turn of the century, 2021, and it was much more bloody. And the reason it was much more bloody was because the Israelis launched preemptive attacks. So in the first 2 days, they ran off 1 billion ammunition rounds were fired at Palestinians, and the response from the Palestinians was the second intifada was much more associated with the brigades. It wasn't about mass demonstrations and mass protests. It was much more than brigades. It was a fight, unequal fight between David and Goliath, but nevertheless, that's what it was. So that's in Palestine. But if you look more generally across the Arab world, bread riots are called intifadas. Uprising against the Egyptian regime was called an intifada. And in my own case, in the document I gave to the police, I said that if you took that word and you applied it to British history, I think there are 3 or 4 examples in which an Arab would look at them and say that that's an intifada. So the Chartist uprising, which was about the charter for a vote for working men, which in the centre of Preston, we've got the statue outside the 1842 pub, because that commemorates the shooting of those strikers in 1842. I think Arabs would call that the Chartist Intifada.
So it was more in relation to the language you used then, yeah, because one other quote, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously I've taken this off published materials online, you said, "I'm obviously relieved that no further action is being taken and that I was never charged. I said from the outset that this was politically motivated attack and a complete waste of council and police time and money." You also went on to say that you accused those that complained of intimidation and being desperate to shut down criticism of Israel's actions. First of all, did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay. So who is it that is behind this then?
So as I said, the complaints originated with Reform in Preston.
So other politicians?
So not so much the councillors, but the Reform, their members. So Preston Reform West, they put a complaint in. But amongst in their Facebook discussion where the complaint was, there was also well-known local Zionists were part and parcel of that discussion. And the complaint to the police came from two well-known local Zionists.
Right, I see. It's just interesting because we always see tweets and comments by other people. I mean, I can straight away name off the top of my head Boris Johnson and the letterbox quote.
Yeah.
Donald Trump and his hundreds, if not thousands, of tweets that are misogynistic, racist, sexist, whatever you want to call it. I don't think they've ever been questioned, have they?
No.
It's incredible. And that leads me on to actually talk about the Western perception, ordinary people in the West, Western media. From an educated point of view, I have to stress, give us a brief background of the situation in Gaza, because I, for one, hate when it's referred to as a war, because it's not. So give us the educated view for the Western media and the Western people.
Okay. So I think there's a number of things that we would want to say about Gaza. First of all, what the reality is. So if you look at the UN, if you look at all the leading NGOs, if you look at those who have got access, there is now no doubt that what has taken place in the last 2 years is a genocide on the people of Gaza by the Israeli state. They have targeted men, women and children. They have used food, water and basic utilities as weapons of war, which is a war crime. They have been indiscriminate in their bombing. I was reading yesterday that the levels of destruction in Gaza, so the rubble, is greater than the combined volume of rubble in all other wars this century. What people may not realise is how small Gaza is. It's 21 miles long. It's just over a mile wide at its widest point. Of course, the Israeli state has now compressed that, and we now have 2 million people. Hopefully 2 million people, it might be less, because I suspect that the numbers killed are far, far in excess of the official numbers that we have at this present time, and they have squeezed those into an area. And though there is a ceasefire, it is in many ways a ceasefire in name only, because hardly a day goes by without the Israelis shooting other people, and they have not agreed and have not let in the appropriate levels of urgent aid that is required. So, very simply, this is a genocide punctuated by a whole host of war crimes, and if the international community is serious about having an international rule-based order, then the leaders of the State of Israel and their armed forces should be brought in front of a court in The Hague, and they should face crimes against humanity.
So why is there such a reluctance in this country, in our country, to do anything about it?
So so let me answer that in two ways. So first of all, let me slightly disagree with you. I think if you look at this country, if you look at America, if you look in Germany, the governments of those countries are absolutely pro-Israel. But if you look at the population in those countries, they are now absolutely in favour of an all-out ceasefire. They are in favour of isolating Israel. They are in favour of Palestinian rights. And that's important because I think in terms of popular consciousness, what ordinary people think, whether they are Muslim, Christian, actually, if you look in New York, look at the number of Jewish voters who voted for Zoran, who, you know, there's a major split in all those areas. So whether you are a person of no faith, or Muslim, or Christian, or Jewish, or Hindu, the majority opinion is Israel is wrong, Israel needs to be isolated, the Palestinian needs rights, we need a ceasefire now, and a proper ceasefire, and urgent aid going in. That's there. That's the global picture. Right around the world, this has shifted. Israel has never been more isolated.
I don't think it's an issue. I
but
think
then you've got
anyone with a sense of, with an ounce of humanity will agree with that. But what I meant by why is the
government?
So
it's the governments.
It can't just be because they're pro-Israel.
So, well, I actually think it's because Israel provides a very particular role for Western interests in the Middle East. So I think you have to understand where the State of Israel came from and its role, and start off by saying that, and maybe that's bringing some contradictions, so maybe we can cover some of this, but if you look at the Middle East, it's a vitally important area in a number of spheres. First of all, there is oil in the region. Secondly, started off during the Cold War, but it remains an incredibly important strategic centre. It was the centre of the Cold War conflict between the Soviet Union and the Americans. Now it's between America and China. Russia's still there. So strategically, in terms of the long-term military and economic interests of the Western countries, it's a very important area. And in that very, very important area, there is one state that has been supported by the West because it is, in their own words, so the Israeli newspaper Haaretz in 1953 said that Israel will survive as long as it can become, and this is the phrase that they used, the watchdog state of the Middle East. What they meant, I think it's a really vivid statement, but I think it's quite an accurate one. Israel gets backed to the hilt by Britain and America and the European Union. They get weapons, they get finance, because they are the watchdog for Western interests in the Middle East. Whenever there's anything that needs to be done, Israel goes in. It's got its own interests. It wants to expand its own borders.
I remember in the space of a week they bombed, was it Lebanon?
Yep.
Palestine.
Yep.
Syria,
and
Libya,
Iran.
and there was one more country
Iran.
in the space of a week. Iran. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking earlier about the difficulties in this country for the general population. Yeah. How much money are we sending over to Israel then?
Yeah. So I don't know how much we're sending directly, because our it comes, because frankly, it comes from all different budgets and the government doesn't tell us. But what we can say is that every day throughout the last 2 years, there have been RAF flights leaving from Cyprus and flying over Gaza and relaying information to the Israelis. So we have been part and parcel of their war effort or their genocide effort in that area. Just from doing that, we have provided weapons for them. We have provided diplomatic cover for them. We have been, when I say we, I mean our governments, if you like, have been an outspoken supporter of them. Even a couple of weeks ago, Keir Starmer was out saying that he wants to make the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." He wants to make that a criminal offence. So he's intending to ramp up his authoritarianism against anybody who's pro-Palestinian. We've had all of that that's going on, primarily because I think Israel has that big strategic role to play for Western interests. But I do think the last 2 years has created some problems for Israel and the West. I think it's fascinating that they have bombed this place to smithereens, and yet on their own account, 3 weeks ago they said that at least 60% of Hamas's tunnels were untouched. They failed. I think it was significant that when they had that skirmish, that 2 or 3 week skirmish with Iran, Iran's missiles breached their Iron Dome system on several occasions, inflicting significant damage on Israel. Israel's not the powerful bully of the Middle East that it thought it once was. When they bombed the Hamas leadership or tried to take them out in Qatar, America clearly called them to heel. We all saw Donald Trump swearing at them or whatever on screen, but called them to heel. And of course, internally, there is huge discontent with Netanyahu, and he knows that if he stops this, he's probably going to go to jail for corruption charges. Then you put the broader case about the Zionist case for the protection of Israel, and globally, in terms of consciousness, I think people are split with that. Have left that behind. The attack on, if you're not pro-Israel, you're anti-Semitic. People don't believe that anymore. And I think the fact that Zoran won in the main Jewish areas in New York is a massive problem for the Zionist political project.
And I think we're seeing that more and more, which it gives you a bit of hope, because, it's hard to change things at the top, but I guess one of the starting points is the people themselves.
Absolutely.
And I've been a big advocate of trying to share news, etc. And when I see people refusing to do what they did for Ukraine, for Gaza, it gets on my nerves. I outright call them hypocrites because they are. Now, what I want to finish on is a little bit of not a test, but I'm going to give you a few names and I want you to give us your opinion in a few words.
Okay.
Just a few words.
Okay. Am I going to get sued after this? Is there anything I'm going to say something dodgy about?
Well, we'll see what happens. I'll do the same. I'll do the same. So the first person I always was going to start off with was Keir Starmer. I refuse to call him Sir Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer, in a few words, what's your opinions on him?
A disastrous Prime Minister, an authoritarian, and somebody who deserves to be kicked out.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
He deserves to be in The Hague and he deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Okay. Rishi Sunak.
A non-entity.
Jeremy Corbyn.
A very genuine man. I know him personally. He is in person like his public persona. I think he has been subject to a huge defamation campaigns. I hope he is very successful in leading your party forward.
Donald Trump.
I hope he joins Netanyahu in The Hague someday.
Zoran Mamdani.
Like Jeremy Corbyn, I think he seems like a very genuine man. He's somebody who, if I'd been in New York, I would have been campaigning and voting for.
Okay. And the final one, yourself.
A retired academic who is trying to be a councillor in Lancashire and represent the people that voted for me.
Lovely. Well, we'll end it on there. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Thank you.